All right, welcome back on in. This is season 7, episode number 5 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2025 Chinese GP review show, and you've got Andy, and I'm along as always with Cody tonight. And we just wrapped up talking about our first sprint weekend of the season, a race that saw some comers, some goers, and some people who literally got thrown out. But what does all of that do to the standings? Cody, after round 2, if you'll take the drivers, I will take the teams.
All right. Lando Norris still sits atop the drivers' standings after a good Grand Prix performance, finishing second. He is in first with 44 points. However, due to mostly the sprint performance, he only extends his lead over Max Verstappen by 1 point. Still an extension, though, so doing well. Max Verstappen sitting in second place on 36 points, and actually it's very close for the moment between second, third, and fourth. So Max in second on 36, George Russell in third with 35, and Oscar Piastri gets the big haul of points this week, and he's in fourth with 34. So very tight, really, between the top four, especially second, third, and fourth. Kimi Antonelli getting some really good points as well. He's sitting in fifth place with 22 points. Alex Albon probably doing much better than we were expecting. The Williams looked good in testing, but wasn't expecting him to be quite up this high at the moment. Sixth place with 16 points. Esteban Ocon having a really good comeback for Haas at seventh with 10 points. He's tied on points with Lance Stroll. I mean, we got to give credit where credit is due. He's actually had a fairly decent start to the season. It's got to be said. He's in eighth place with 10 points. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc are in ninth and 10th, respectively, for Ferrari. 9 and 8 points each. It's a little weird to see them behind a Williams, Haas, and Aston Martin at this point. However, that's because they only got points for the sprints, because they were both disqualified from the Grand Prix.
Yeah, it would have been a much different looking table had their GP points, because they finished, I think, 5th and 6th on the road, respectively. Had they not had them taken away, but that is kind of where we are. We are in a weird reality where Esteban Ocon in the Haas has outscored both Ferrari drivers at this point of the championship. As for our team standings, McLaren, Mercedes, they remain on P1. At one point, they were tied, and then it was 1 point after the sprint, and then the race. They have now opened up a bit of a gap. They are up to 78 points on the season over P2 Mercedes. George Russell keeping them in contention, and Kimi Antonelli doing a very good job in both races as a rookie. They are up to 57 points. P3 Red Bull Racing Honda on the strength of Max Verstappen. And literally right now, that is Max Verstappen, Red Bull Racing Honda, 36 points. They are up to there in P3. P4 is Williams. They're up to 17 points. Thank you very much to Alex Albon. P5 is Ferrari. This is another thing. Would not expect to have seen Ferrari tied with Williams after the first 2 rounds, but here we are. P6 is Haas. They are up to 14 points. So they had themselves a very good weekend. P7 was Aston Martin. They check in with 10 points thanks to Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll being the flag bearer for Aston Martin. We are in a strange universe right now. P8 is Kick Sauber. They remain on the 6 points thanks to Nico Hulkenberg's great effort in Australia. P9 is Racing Bulls. No points today, but certainly they showed well in Australia as well, but they remain on 3 points. And in P10, this is not who we thought was going to be P10, especially how they looked in testing. Alpine, not 0 points on the year, the only team yet to score a point.
I think they're going to get there. They don't look quite as rotten as this time last year. I do think they're going to get the duck at some point, but
yeah,
not off to the greatest start.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does look like we're definitely going to see all 10 teams scoring points and probably scoring into at least double digits. So there is a bit of democracy going on in the standings for sure. All right, you have heard our takes on the weekend and throughout all the sessions. It is now time to turn it over to your takes on what you saw this weekend. It's the fan email segment. We've got our normal contributors. Cody, it's your time to shine. Dave Doherty kicks us off. He got his email in 1 minute in front of Rachel Fleming.
Nice. Just barely making it in first then. Dave Doherty, thank you for your email, Dave. And he says, hi, team. This weekend feels like the top 4 teams are developing the car and team communications. You can see that in Ferrari as they are better than in the Australian GP, especially on the team communication side. It sounded a lot more comfortable between Lewis Hamilton and his engineer, to be said. McLaren, they've got it spot on. Mercedes, they're balancing development. Red Bull, oh boy. But the rookies, I think they are just in a learning stage. E.g., Doohan and Lawson. Your thoughts on my feedback? And now I've seen the disqualification of Ferrari. So this comes in a little bit later. And now I've seen the disqualification of Ferrari, which is hard to settle with on the news. But I feel the sprint format was good for Ferrari rather than the traditional format. So, yes, Ferrari, as we said, they looked really good in the sprint. At least Lewis Hamilton looked really, really good in the sprint. At least for the moment, does appear, as I said before, to be a bit of a flash in the pan. This is still only race 2. Got plenty of time for things to change. You just got to remember last year. Last year at this point, we thought that we were going to see a 2023 repeat and Red Bull was just going to run away with the championship, both championships, and that didn't happen. So still plenty of time for things to change. The Ferraris might look just fine in the traditional race format going forward, and they're going to have to because most of the sprints are stacked toward the last, I think it's half of the sprints are in the last quarter of the season. Yep. It's a little bit backstacked, so they're going to have to do just fine with those regular race weekends if they want to score points here early on. But yeah, I agree with you. McLaren has got it spot on. Mercedes is doing very great. They've definitely made strides with the car. That is showing. Red Bull is in trouble. I'm willing to admit that. They're even Max is not squeezing out race wins, and I was really hoping he'd get the podium this time out. Was not to be. It's not too late, but I think I was reading that they called some kind of emergency meeting to discuss where the car is at. So I'm guessing they really want to get in as much as they can here early on in the season to get that car competitive so that they don't fall too far behind. It's about all we can hope for. They're taking it seriously. They haven't just given up on this season. They're not saying, oh well, we had a good run of 4 drivers championships. Let's see you next year, guys. We're going to let McLaren have this one. No, it does not sound like that's what they're going to do. And that's good because I am here for 5-time consecutive champion Max Verstappen. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I don't think Red Bull are going away, but they brought 15 updates to the car for Melbourne. That's a huge amount of updates, and there's no way that in a race weekend with a bunch of tricky conditions and then back to back that with a sprint, they literally need practice sessions. That's what they need. They need to explore setups, run different things, have both drivers contributing the feedback that's necessary to try to get the car to where it is. And right now they don't have any of it because you had the weird weather in Australia, and that is not a track that, it's kind of a one-off. It's a street track. It doesn't really correlate to a lot of what other F1 tracks are going to give it. Here in China, yeah, this is much more of a traditional track. But again, we talked about the new surface, a sprint weekend, a ton of track evolution to try to stay on top of that. Given 15 new updates is very, very hard. So there's a lot of correlation work that still, I think, needs to be done for Red Bull. But they are going to find themselves at a crossroads where they're going to have to decide, look, the early reports coming out of the Ford aspect of the engine means if you don't have a Mercedes engine, it might be a long 2026. So you would have to think their best chance to maintain reputation, glory, all of that is probably going to be this season. So I would expect them to be one of the last, if not the last, of the big 4 to say, screw it, we're going to focus on 2026. So I do expect them to keep stuff coming, but stuff still has to keep coming through the pipeline. We know that it doesn't take it doesn't, you don't turn on a switch and just have it. This set of updates had to get them somewhere. If it didn't, you're looking at now probably Spain before you really see another significant round of updates. Maybe Bahrain, because that's a track that's obviously they test there. You can bring some more parts to that circuit a lot easier than you can certainly in Japan or China. We already talked just in the lead up to this race. We had 4 teams that could barely get their freight from Australia to here on time, much less trying to bring new parts from their base in the UK over on with a week turnaround. So yeah, there's a lot that they have to they're dealing with a lot. And they're also dealing with a second driver who just isn't up to it right now. And he's either overwhelmed or he's not communicating or something's not working, because it's clearly not working, because we wanted to bury Sergio Checo Perez last year. And nobody's saying anything bad about Checo now, because this has gone about as badly as it could have out of the gate for Liam Lawson, which sucks for him. In terms of the Ferraris benefiting from the sprint, I think the Ferraris benefit in general from new track surface, high grip, high deg. That's, I think, their sweet spot. Are they going to see more of that? I think in tracks where you see more resurfacing done, I think they'll be pretty strong, especially early. As the track evolved and kind of settled in, you saw them come back a little bit. So I think that's kind of what I'm seeing, at least from last year to this year on that car. Mercedes are definitely much more in the game. They're a lot where I would say McLaren were last year when compared to Max. They're able to stay with them for a while. The question is what happens in the latter part of the stint. George did an outstanding job of staying on Lando within like 2 seconds for a good chunk. I would say at least 2/3 of both of those tire stints. It was just in the last little bit that they finally fell off a little bit. So they are definitely making progress, and they're definitely in the game.
Yep. Agreed. Next email comes in from Rachel Fleming. Thank you, Rachel. And she says, well, that was a pretty good race. Oscar was in a world of his own all race, and quite frankly, probably should have won the sprint as well. That McLaren is definitely class of the field. Another great but quiet race for George Russell. Second podium in a row, doing a good job for Mercedes. Sauber watch, Bortoletto messed up the start, but still finished ahead of the Hulk. Alonso watch, brakes failed on the Aston, 0 points from 2 races. Great racing from Ollie Behrman, and got a well-deserved point. And Ocon was brilliant to get 7th, which, as we know, was later kicked up. Haas bouncing back from the disaster of Australia. Though I am annoyed that Kimi won Driver of the Day. That was not deserved compared to the drives of Ocon and Piastri. And here we are at the issue of Liam Lawson. Australia was bad, but this was something else. It's not easy being Max's teammate, but this is getting worse. I mean, I would put Yuki in the car, but Red Bull have shown that they will never do this. We might be eating those words in a couple of weeks' time. I hope they aren't stupid enough to put Hadjar in the car, because that will give them the same result. Now, I have just seen that Autosport are reporting that Red Bull are already considering a switch between Lawson and Yuki for the next race in Japan. That I will admit I did not see coming. And now it looks like both Ferraris are going to be disqualified as well. What drama. And they have been humiliating for Ferrari in particular. Yes, I think we covered Ferrari's woes pretty in-depth. Could have gotten a decent points haul out of the Grand Prix, but it was not to be because of just missing those pesky technical regulations. Yes, the talk now with Liam Lawson's honestly pretty abysmal performance so far is he going to stay in that seat? For how long? I don't think they're going to get Checo back on the phone and bring him back. I really doubt that they're going to be able to get somebody on loan like Valtteri Bottas. So their options seem to be from within the junior Racing Bulls team, which, I mean, Red Bull is fortunate to have that available to them. And I agree with you that it would not be a good idea to put Hadjar in the car right now. He is even more green than Lawson. He's just trying to get to grips with what he's got under him already, I think that would be throwing him into the deep end, and that wouldn't be cool. I mean, apparently it wasn't that cool to throw Lawson in the deep end. Clearly it wasn't ready. I think that their best opportunity is, whatever is holding them up from putting Yuki in that seat. I think they just need to swallow it and just try it out. Like, he's been in RB for many years now, and he's had a lot of issues, but he has also matured as a driver over the years, and I think he deserves a shot with how long he's been in the organization and how he has improved over the years and how he's performing in qualifying right now. He deserves the shot. So even if they decide that they're not going to do it forever, at the very least, let him show what he can do. It seems that they don't intend for him to ever stay in the top, Red Bull seat. So at least let him try to capitalize on his career, let him try to show what he can do in a, what really should be a top performing car. It just isn't quite there at the moment. And, maybe he'll do well, and that'll really help his career, because then people will be like, oh, really? He does have what it takes to drive for a top team. And, that opens up the world to him. I think they're really doing him dirty by just keeping him in that junior team and letting people who have lots less experience than him kind of hop over him into that seat. And we're seeing that is not going well with Lawson. So that's my piece on that.
Yeah, it is. It's a conundrum and a half in a lot of ways. There is the ever promising guy who won the FRACA in New Zealand, which aka the Toyota Racing Series, Arvid Lindblad. That is a name that Red Bull fans should get to know very quickly, because he has a lot of Max Verstappen in him. And there's a lot of comparisons between the driving styles of both of those guys, and they seem to line up. Now,
he's also a baby.
Yes, Arvid Lindblad doesn't have a super license yet and needs to, grow. So,
literally, yes.
Besides that, but you have so many contenders for this seat that apparently, again, now we're back to nobody can seem to want to sit in it. And if Liam Lawson goes out, what does that do to his career, which looked ever so promising? I think you're going to see a swap. I think that the patience has got to run out. They got to do something. They got to do something now. They can't afford to get any worse in the constructors than they already are, if they have any aspirations of being in that fight. Because if the car isn't quite where it is and it's only Max, you're fighting with two arms behind your back against people who aren't going to be waiting around for you to sort your stuff out. So I as much as I hate it, I don't like that this is how they manage it, but if they're going to make a move, they probably should do it now and get it over with, and let Yuki come into his home race where he's going to have all of this support, and let him go out and do it. And he's either going to do it or not. And then if he doesn't, then then at least you know what the answer is. You give him 4 or 5 races, and if you want to put Liam back in the car, it almost feels like sending a prized pitcher back down to the minors to work some stuff out. And sometimes that's what you have to do. And you clear his head, get him out of his own head, because he's clearly inside of his own head right now. And maybe that ends up working. There's a lot of evidence that suggests it doesn't, but I don't really know what else you do, because these 2 weekends have been abysmal. Doesn't even do it kind, unfortunately, for Liam Lawson. So they have to do something. But yeah, it's just a very complicated, very unfortunate situation that we're finding ourselves in, because Liam is a nice guy, is a guy that I would want to root for. He's another guy who went down to in New Zealand and dominated that Toyota Racing Series. So yeah, it's just so unfortunate that it's just come to this so fast.
Yeah, I don't think any of us were expecting that. I mean, we were ready to give a lot of critique to Lawson, but I don't think we were really expecting it to be this harsh this quickly.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Rachel, for your email. Our last one comes in from The Formula, and he says, Fernando Alonso can't catch a break. It's it's hard to brake when your brakes break. He's probably looking forward to a 2-week break. That race was a bit of a snoozer overall, but I'm dang happy to see so much orange in the podium.
There we go.
Also, well done, Haas. Yes, I love.
Oh wait,
yeah,
let's
there
not
you
run
go.
it twice.
Yes, love the wordplay there. Fantastically done. Yeah, I found this race to be more interesting from a strategy standpoint, with the fact that it ended up being a one-stop and no one really saw that coming. So we kind of saw that developing. We saw, because of that, anyone who started off on the hard, which was only a few drivers, really kind of ended up in a weird spot because they were just extending their stints longer and longer, and therefore kind of putting them in a good position for later on when they went on the mediums at the end. So that development was interesting. The bit with Leclerc having good performers despite losing the end plate on its front wing. The whole Lando brakes failing, apparently, debacle at the end. There was definitely good things to take away from this race. Was it as much of a banger as Australia? No, but it was also dry. So, get from it what you can.
Yeah, I got a funny feeling next year's race, with that surface being in for a year, will probably lead to a lot better racing. Simply because I think then the straight, they did do the thing with the DRS that didn't really prove to be very pivotal or significant almost in any way. I didn't see a whole lot of, well, that was clearly a DRS thing. Nobody was yelling at the DRS is too powerful or anything like that. So I think it was just a product of the surface and the fact that I've said this also many times. When all 20 drivers are on the same compound of tire, there's no tire offset because they're all basically almost in on the same lap. It's really hard to get an entertaining wheel-to-wheel banging race out of that. Because, yeah, and what, even though these cars were designed to be so much better to follow, there's still the rule of once you get within 2 seconds, you're going to eat up the tires is now very much back in play. And, you can kind of see why it feels like, at least from a racing standpoint, we're almost ready to go to the next set of regulations, simply because we've kind of gone back to kind of where we were in 2021. But 2021 was a hell of a year. So let's see kind of where these go before we're done. But you're going to have some races like this, and I'm not surprised given what happened. All right. So thank you very much to everybody who contributed in the fan email segment. We do enjoy. It's always my favorite part of the program, is reacting to your guys' thoughts on what you saw over the weekend. All right. So we will now move into our awards. And as we are apt to do, we shall start with the rubbish. Cody, I'll let you go first on this one. What you got here?
Sorry to say, I got to go with Liam Lawson on this one. Qualified 20th in both the sprint qualifying and Grand Prix qualifying. Didn't finish in the points in either race, despite the qualifications of 3 drivers ahead of him and being in the Red Bull car. Nobody was expecting him to be Max Verstappen right out of the gate. I don't even know if anyone was really expecting him to be quite up to Sergio Perez levels to start off with here. But I don't think anyone was expecting him to be quite in the position that he is currently in, where he might be setting the land speed record for quickest kick out of the Red Bull seat.
Yeah, it's yikes. That's a really good candidate. But I guess this one for me has got to go Ferrari's way, because not just one, but 2 cars thrown out for violations of the technical regulations. I feel real bad for Lewis, who's like, the way that they, the skid wear. I saw it compared to, I think Craig Slater went on Sky and said, it's the size of your ID, and half of that is what he got thrown out for. And it's nothing, and it doesn't really affect the performance of the car, and it just sucks. But the underweight thing, I want to hear what the explanation is for why they suddenly went from compliant to non-compliant, or what happened, because that's just weird. And the same thing with Gasly too. Like it's
Yeah, it's
very
weird that it
strange.
happened to 2 different teams.
Right.
Like, if at least if it happened to like 1 car or 2 cars in the same team, I'd be like, all right, they made a miscalculation or something weird happened. They just didn't put enough fuel in the car. The fact that it happened with two different teams is very strange.
Yeah, indeed. So Ferrari, you get my rubbish award this week. All right, so we will move into analysis paralysis. I'll go first on this one. Got to give it to the Racing Bulls because it was not a two-stopper, boys. And as much as you tried to make it one, nobody went with you. And even though the smart money was it was going to be a two-stopper, you obviously didn't read the conditions or the situation right, and it cost both your drivers. Yuki Tsunoda's wing failure notwithstanding, I think both drivers deserved a lot better than the results that they got, and it basically came from the pit wall call to do the two-stop. So, Cody, what you got for analysis paralysis?
I'm going to go a little bit of a weird take on this one. I'm going to almost spread this to just kind of all the teams in general. Is it one stop? Is it a two stop? Did absolutely no one think to get data on the new hard tires? Especially coming into this track, which you were expecting to be very high deg because of the new surface. It just seems very strange to me that even with only one practice session, no one tried them out. No one tried them out in the sprint, even on a long shot. No one tried them at all until the actual Grand Prix, and then they turned out to probably be the best tire. So,
if anything, they were too good.
Situation. And yeah, I'm gonna go with it on that. You know, you were even saying that it's a new tire that they developed, and I would think that they would have wanted to try to get some data on the tire that they don't have any data on.
Yeah, I think part of the reason is I think everybody's one set short. Like I think in a normal GP weekend you get 13. I think for a sprint weekend you get 12. And you've got so many mandatory tires on certain sessions. So, you know, your sprint qualifying, you definitely want to get a read of your medium because you got to go out and run quali laps on the medium. And you also want to run quali laps on the soft. So you want to get a read on the soft. And I just don't think there's time in a sprint weekend for it. I take your point fully on this one because it's kind of baffling that nobody even tried to think, well, maybe we should try one in the sprint and see what it does and make that be our long run on it and let's see what it does. But the fact that nobody did, I assume there has to be a reason, and it's probably because I think everybody is one set down and trying to keep enough sets throughout the course of the weekend is very, very paramount. But I get your point. I totally get your point. All right. So we will move into our dark horse of the day. Cody, I'll let you go first on this one. What you got here?
I'm going to give the dark horse award to Lewis Hamilton for qualifying pole in the sprint, winning the sprint. After the showing in Australia, I certainly wasn't expecting that to happen. It's a great showing for Lewis, just kind of reminding everyone why he is one of the greatest of all time. And despite the fact it didn't show quite so well in the Grand Prix, I do hope that we see some more flashes of brilliance from Ferrari later this season.
Yeah, and I think that part of it, if you're a Ferrari fan, you should get excited for it because it's definitely the fire's still there. The ability is definitely still there, and I think that was confirmed by Hamilton in the sprint for sure. My dark horse is going to go out to the Haas F1 team, who, after their showing in Australia and after the test that they didn't even do a quali run, and then they go out in Australia and they are literally bumping up the bottom of the grid and didn't look competitive at all, to in a week do the analysis to figure out what was wrong and then to make some corrections that you can make and get it righted to the point where you got not only one car but both cars in the points. Yes, helped out by the DQs for sure, but Esteban Ocon is sitting in front of Lewis Hamilton right now in points. So like it or not, you got to respect what Haas pulled out this weekend, and so they get my dark horse award for China here. Well going, Haas F1. All right, so driver of the day. I think we have agreement here. Cody, what you got?
I'm going to go with Oscar Piastri. Didn't really put a foot wrong from the start of the Grand Prix. He got his first ever official Grand Prix pole position, which is awesome. Bounced back from a rough go in Australia where he definitely deserved better. And is right back in the championship hunt. As did everything he needed to do. And man, Oscar is cool as ice. He looked bored on the podium after the race. He's just sitting there kind of tongue in cheek, it's kind of like, oh, whatever. Yeah, I don't think there's anything that really bends him out of shape.
He does smile in his Instagram posts. I mean, it's usually kind of like once everybody goes away and he can kind of take it in, that's when the emotion comes out. I think he just has this cool as ice persona that just, gets him through whenever he gets stressed. And it obviously served him really well because I don't think he was bothered at all in the race, hardly ever, other than the first corner. And then, he made the move that was necessary to make George make a decision. And from then on out, he was pretty much in the clear air and all good to go. My driver of the day will be, and the Oscar goes to Piastri. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, doing that one more time. Why not? Oh, come on. There we go. Now I gotta stop it before it plays again. But the wheels have come off. It's a little late. But anyway, I thought the best thing that he did over the course of this weekend was the fact that he took it to Lando in qualifying, because that's what he's going to have to do. That gave him the preferential strategy. That made the team calls a lot more straightforward for him. He wasn't on the back foot of any of that. Didn't have to worry about getting undercut or anything like that. So that was very, very good to see. If you're an Oscar Piastri fan, I am also very, very excited I still think this kid's got a lot of untapped potential, and we're just seeing the beginnings of it. So there's a lot more to come from this guy as well. All right. So now, before we hop on out, we will do a recap of the predictions. I hate to say it, but my angry Oscar theory ended up proving to be pretty good for me. I had him on the pole, so he got the pole. I technically did get the fastest lap time. I got P2 in the sprint podium because I had Oscar and Max coming in those positions. So I got P3 in the sprint podium, and I actually swept the podium. This doesn't happen to me very often, but I did call it Oscar, Lando, George. Cody, you managed to get 3 points on the weekend. You got the quali time because you were faster than me. Our quali times were awful. I looked at the FP1 and went back to the document and said, oh, that's not good. We were already slower in FP1. But you also got P3 in the sprint podium with Max, and you got the fastest lap driver because Lewis Hamilton got kicked out. He had the fastest lap. That no longer counts. So that goes to Lando Norris. So you got that as your 3rd point. But I'm doing good in the predictions this year. This is a 2-0 lead now, as I am getting on it at least early in the season. We'll have to see if that form continues. I wouldn't count on it. All right, Cody, any final thoughts as we wrap up the first sprint weekend of the season, the Chinese Grand Prix? We get a week break, and then we're right back at it, the triple header. So these races are coming at us thick and fast. But any final thoughts?
A couple of good races to start the season. We had one absolute nutty race and something a little bit more down to earth, but still with its charms. And definitely seeing great things from McLaren as expected. I'm looking forward to the triple header after the break. Just take that F1 and inject it directly into my veins. And fingers crossed from me that Red Bull figures out something here in the week off to come back stronger for Japan. I really like the Suzuka circuit. I think it's a really fun one to watch the cars go around on. If it doesn't, these days make for the most exciting Grand Prix because it's difficult to pass at the very least, it is fun to watch qualifying. So if you're into the qualifying sessions, it's a good one for that.
Yep. The Japan circuit is our next stop in 2 weeks. The cherry blossoms will be blooming. It will be springtime in Japan, and Japan always has the possibility of weather. So you never know when it may rain. So we may not be done. It may not be a very straightforward weekend. We will have to see. But we will be back within Not this week, but next week with a preview, and then we will do our best to recap all of the twists and turns that will be the Japanese Grand Prix. But until then, enjoy your other forms of racing. I think MotoGP is on. I think they're in the U.S. They're at Coda in the next day or next couple of weeks or something like that. IndyCar was over at Thermal. And apparently the lights went out and the broadcast went dark for a good 20 minutes. And we were all watching literally the timing screen. That was all we had because there was nothing. But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff going on. But anyway, enjoy that until we are back. So for Cody, it's been Andy. And as always, may all your laps be fast.